Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for being here. I'm sure there's many other things you could be doing in Martin this afternoon, or maybe not. I don't know, but you're here, and we all appreciate it. I'm Dr. Anton Garcia Fernandez, a professor of Spanish here at the university. I've been here for about 9 years, and I want to read a short excerpt from Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, which is the story of Ricote and Ana Félix, two Moriscos, that appear towards the end of the second part of Don Quixote, chapter 63 and 64. And I would like first to give you a little bit of background on this story. Of course, Don Quixote is a novel in two parts, written by Cervantes in 1605 and then 1615. And with it, Cervantes really becomes the creator of the modern novel. All the literature before Cervantes is reflected in Don Quixote, but greatly modified. Chivalric novels, for example, picaresque novels, Byzantine novels, theater. But he also prefigures many of the literary genres that would come after. The perspectivist novels already here. The epic theater of Bertolt Brecht is already here as well. The epistolary novel, elements of metafiction, it's all in there. Some critics even believe that Don Quixote contains the DNA of literature seen through the eyes of Cervantes. Throughout the novel, he comments on a wide range of topics and ideas, all of which are relevant to the present day, and I think each day more and more so. Read Don Quixote, and you will learn to look at the world around you from a more critical perspective, because that's what Cervantes does all the time throughout this over 1,000 pages. Civil rights. There are many passages where Cervantes comments on the role of women in society, on the idea of freedom, on the idea of justice, on slavery, and on countless other ideas related to civil rights. We can learn a great deal from reading Cervantes speaking through Don Quixote or Sancho Panza or many other characters. Let's talk about the episode of Ricote and Ana Félix, two Moriscos who were separated following the expulsion of the Moriscos from Spain between 1609 and 1613. Now, but who were the Moriscos? You may wonder. They were Muslims who lived in Spain and either were invited, let's say forced, to convert to Catholicism, or some of them did it of their own accord. They were expelled by King Philip III for many reasons that I won't go into, but these reasons were religious, they were social, they were economic, and many others. This was happening, all of this was happening while Cervantes was writing the second part of Don Quixote, and this was a very hot topic in Spain at the time. So Cervantes decides to include the story of Ricote and Ana Félix in chapters 63 and 64 of the second part. And by means of this story, he does something that was quite unusual at the time in Spain and in the rest of Europe, of course. He presents the Morisco characters, Ricote and Ana Félix, in a positive light, not as heretics, but as the victims of the expulsion, which has greatly impacted their lives. Cervantes is against any form of discrimination because of race, because of sex, because of religion, and he acts as what he truly seems to be, what some critics have called a Catholic atheist. Ana Félix is a woman dressed as a man who is the captain of a galley slave ship and who has been separated from her lover and from her father, Ricote, against her will because of the expulsion of the Moriscos. She tells the story of her life to Don Quixote, Sancho, and many other characters, and in the end, she will be reunited with her father and eventually with her lover. Let me read from the pretty much close to the end of the novel. They're in Barcelona at this point. And here is Ana Félix dressed as a man, very common in the comedias and in the theater of the time. And she says, "I was born to Morisco parents and am of that nation, more unhappy than wise, upon whom a sea of afflictions has lately poured down. In the current of their misfortunes, I was taken to Barbary by two of my uncles, and it did me no good to say that I was a Christian, as in fact I am, and not one of the false or apparent ones, but a true Catholic Christian. In vain did I tell this truth to those responsible for a wretched banishment, he says, huh? And my uncles did not wish to believe it. Either instead, they considered it a lie and an invention that I had devised in order to remain in the land where I had been born. So she basically is made to go to a foreign land, and then while she's in a foreign land, she has money, and she is very pretty, and so she is taken advantage of by some character that has power. All this time, she is in love with a man who's in love with her, and she can't be with him because of this expulsion, and most of all, she cannot be with her father, Ricote, either. The interesting thing about the story is that at some point, when she finishes telling her story, her father, Ricote, comes springing out of the audience. He was one of the characters that was hearing, along with Don Quixote, along with Sancho Panza, and he says, "Oh, Ana Félix, my unfortunate daughter, I am your father, Ricote, who came back to find you, because I cannot live without you, for you are my soul." And then he goes on and on, talking a little bit about the situation that he was in. "Señores, this is my daughter, more unfortunate in what has happened to her than in her name." Felix means happy in Latin, and that's why he says this. "She is called Ana Félix, and her surname is Ricote, and she is as famous for her beauty as she is for my wealth. I left my country to look in foreign lands for a place that would welcome and shelter us, and having found it in Germany, I came back dressed as a pilgrim in the company of other Germans to find my daughter and retrieve the great riches I left hidden here." He is actually risking his life to do this, to come back to Spain and find his daughter, which he does, and the riches that he has had to bury somewhere so they wouldn't be taken away from him. Now, the interesting thing to finish is that after he keeps telling his story and goes more in depth into what has happened, Sancho Panza himself comes to his rescue. And after hearing Ricote, he actually knew Ricote from before. If you read chapter, I think, 55, they actually meet at some point. And so Sancho says, "I know Ricote very well, and I know that what he says about Ana Félix being his daughter is true. And as for this other business of coming and going and having good intentions, I have nothing to say about that." So, as you can see, Cervantes, through Sancho and through the way that the story is told, is aligning himself with the Moriscos. He's not against the Moriscos. He's for them. He understands their plight. Does any of this ring a bell to anyone around here? The plight of refugees, the discrimination of people for religious reasons, the separation of families, wives and husbands, kids and parents, against their will, the use of a group of people as scapegoats for all kinds of social or economic ills, because that's one of the reasons why the Moriscos were expelled. That was one of the reasons why the Jews were expelled before, even though Spain was not the first country that expelled the Jews. But anyway, through the way that Ana Félix and Ricote tell this story, and then through Sancho's words, Cervantes is approaching the Moriscos as what they are, people with both positive and negative features, but whose lives have been impacted by what Ana Félix refers to very clearly and very correctly, I think, as a wretched banishment. Thank you very much.